Hinchcliffe has to dash off at 12, so I'm going to try and get to transport. But I know it's absolutely a packed programme today, and it's 2023, and we're setting next year's budget, outlining the pipeline projects. We're discussing adult education, budget and the current situation on our buses. And we've also, as you can see, a fair few project approvals around transport, culture, housing, and moving projects from concept and business into delivery on the ground, something that I've been pushing all of our officers to focus on delivery and outcomes. So without further ado, let's crack on. So any apologies? My understanding is Councillor Robinson has apologised for not being here, and Ian?
Yes, so also apologies from Councillor Swift and Councillor Jeffrey. Councillor Scullion is attended as substitute, and I think we are expecting Councillor Morley.
That's excellent, thank you. And moving on to item 2, declarations of interest. Do any members have interests they wish to declare at this point for agenda items? No, great, thank you. Moving on, item 3, exclusion of press and public. Now, officers have identified that the 3 appendices to item 13 contain exempt information. If members want to discuss the exempt appendices, we'll have to agree to the exclusion of press and public when we get to the relevant section of the item. Are colleagues prepared for that if we get to that point? Thank you. Are we content to agree the recommendation that that information is exempt? We are. Some nods. Thank you so much. Turning to the minutes of the meeting of the Combined Authority on 8th of December 2022. Any comments or questions? Are we content to accept the minutes? Thank you. Righto. Moving on to the items that are for decision. Business planning and budgets, item 5. This report asks us to approve the proposed business plan and budget for 23-24 financial year, as well as the revised position for 22-23. Now, I hope you agree with me that we've achieved so much during the last year at a time when our communities and businesses and local authority partners have come under really significant financial and economic pressure. We're not immune to the rates of inflation and cost increases that have been felt across the economy. And you'll remember from previous meetings, we've taken decisions early around how we deal with this within our capital budget, project budgets. Our plan and budget for the next 5 years has been produced against this backdrop. We've frozen the transport levy on our local authority partners where other MCAs have raised theirs, and identified efficiency and cost savings to make sure we are a lean and delivery-focused organisation. As ever, the budget we're setting does not come with a block grant from government. Like other mayoral combined authorities, we receive no core funding for the organisation. But despite this, we are ambitious, and through our new outcome-led operating model and business plan, we're working even harder and are laser focused to deliver the outcomes we've all agreed for our region. We all want a more inclusive and stronger region, a more sustainable economy where people and businesses can truly thrive. Equality, diversity and inclusion, as well as our climate commitments, run through the activities in the plan. So the first part of the paper sets out the approach to business planning, with the plans on a page for each directorate set out in Appendix 1. These plans on a page set out what the CA officers will be working on over the course of the next year. But clearly they don't capture fully all of the work we're supporting across the region alongside our local authority partners. And the rest of the paper sets out the proposed budget for 23-24, developing the approach and information following the meeting in December, and also includes a revised outturn of what we've actually spent for the current year and the Treasury Management Statement for approval. Now, thank you, Angela, for even when unwell, dedicated to the Combined Authority and coming online to talk us through this paper. Would you be happy to talk through this report, Ben? Do you want to make some opening remarks and then go to Angela?
I think I would only say what you've already said. So
okay, so let's go to Angela. Thank you, Angela. Thanks. I'll go to Ben and then questions from the room.
Thank you, Chair. Just to pick up a couple of additional points, because this is the first budget that is developed around the new structure for the combined authority in terms of the directorates, and it kind of signals a move to more focus on the outcomes, budgets, and work being focused at the directorate level. So, as Angela said, we're setting out the kind of plan on a page for each directorate alongside the budgets for each directorate. I think the element where we still want to come back to is a focus a bit more on the outcomes. I had conversations with various of you about that in this preparations of this paper, and in terms of reporting back over the course of the year in terms of the achievement of those outcomes against expenditure. As Angela said, there is a clear risk to these budgets from cost inflation, particularly in the public transport sector, but that's not the only risk, and we are very alive to budgetary and inflationary pressures on all of the budgets. There is also, some of the measures to deal with that are set out in these papers this morning. The other thing I would say on inflation pressures is that we went through, just a reminder that we went through the process last year of looking at the cost base in the capital programmes, both looking at how to handle those pressures and to over-programme to ensure that we were taking projects forward to the point that we would end the process with a more established and ready-to-go pipeline than we began. So even though it is costing more to deliver the same projects, we will end up in a position where we've got a stronger pipeline to take advantage of future opportunities. The other thing I would say is that the paper draws out some of the cross-cutting themes. So although we have 7 priorities that cut across all the work that the Combined Authority does, we've drawn out the cross-cutting themes around equality, diversity and inclusion and carbon reduction in the paper, because to ensure they don't get lost in the plans on the page. Stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, and certainly the focus on carbon reduction was something that was definitely strengthened in the previous drafts of these papers, because I did feel that it wasn't every department has to do the heavy lifting, otherwise we'll never get there. So I am grateful to the officers for focusing a little bit more on EDI and climate emergency. Mark.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Angela and team. I fully understand the challenges with pulling together a budget like this in the challenging circumstances, and to come and share it, even remotely when you're ill, we all really appreciate. I think Ben referenced the first point I would like to make, which is that clearer link between what we're spending our money on and the more medium to longer term outcomes that we're trying to deliver. And I think it's great that we've got the strategy on a page, but tying it more closely to longer term outcomes and reviewing that at FRCC and also against the West Yorkshire Plan, I think would be a very helpful action for us all to take. The second point I'd like to make just refers to the indicative capital expenditure in Appendix 4. And I guess I just want to highlight the sort of historical context and the future direction. And it's great that spending on transport is growing. It really is great. But let us all be aware that conversely, as government is cutting back on some of the mainstream funding for economic programmes, our ability to spend money on the economy and to do things such as regenerating brownfield sites and boosting business grants is getting limited by the fact that there is sort of fewer opportunities to spend. And if we look at that trajectory from economic support and transport, we just need to be aware of that, and the projections going forwards are that sort of grows even further. So I would just like to make us all aware of that. I'm sure we all are, but then to ask, well, what can we do about that? How can we make sure that we are spending sufficient on the economy as we go forwards?
That's a great contribution. Thank you, Mark. And certainly that consolidation of expected outcomes across all directorates that aligns with the West Yorkshire Plan is really sensible and would give us maybe more of a focus about how we can consolidate across directorates too. Regarding the business funding from government, I don't know, Angela or Ben, one of the things that I've tried to focus people's minds on is sustainability and income generation from ourselves, and asking each directorate to say how are we going to make our own money as well, how are we going to get our investment to come back to us. So it's something that we are very much alive to. Ben, do you want to come in now? I'll come to you, Jane.
Thank you, Chair. So I think it's exactly the right point in terms of that transition away to where we're deploying gain share and other similar funding to move towards loans rather than grants, so that funding can be recycled. I think what Mark is alluding to is a really well made point. It just reflects the fact that the government has drawn back funding that used to be devolved. So, for example, further education capital or the growth deals themselves. So we don't have those funds. They've run their course and they've not been replaced. So we continue the efforts to try and ensure that future funds are devolved, of course.
Thank you, Jane.
Thank you, Mayor. I also want to pay tribute to the staff of the Combined Authority and the Mayor staff, because I thought there is really a bit of maturity and coherence to the budget this year, and that's extraordinary given the amount of financial volatility we're actually dealing with. And there are so many unknowns, inflation, etc. I think the current format is much easier to understand, and I'm sure it'll be easier to scrutinise, and those are all good things for democracy. I'm conscious that the next 2 years are really going to be the real challenge in terms of balancing the books, but also, as you said earlier, Mayor, being ambitious, really. How do we, over the next 2 years, in what's probably going to continue to be a time of financial volatility, how do we actually keep hold of that ambition in terms of what we want to do for West Yorkshire? So this is really good. And I'm sorry, it sounded slightly patronising to say I'm surprised by the maturity and coherence of the budget, but actually it's well meant, it's sincerely meant. Actually, I think this is really a good budget for the future.
Thank you. And just to your point about funding as well, that let's not forget, we were in the bottom of the queue when it came to levelling up money. So we're going to have to be more independent. We are pioneers in West Yorkshire. We've got to be ambitious with the resources we have, but also still call for fair funding for West Yorkshire and across the north. Councillor Galton.
Thanks, Chair. And it's on that issue of maturation of the organisation that I'm wanting to comment. I noted when I had my briefing that what was mentioned in terms of the scrutiny offering their skill set to overview the budget, the actual meeting of scrutiny was held in private. So there's still very limited access for the public to see how we're managing our budget and the scrutiny involved within it. And I'm just wondering if in future years we can ensure that such scrutiny is public.
There are definitely some positives on public scrutiny, and the COM that I chair, where we challenge and hold the Chief Constable to account on particular themes, is really valued, I think, by the public. I wonder, Ben, do you want to comment on the restrictions around scrutiny? Just to say, we have 3 scrutiny committees, and that is quite unique for an MCA, and I'm really proud of that we hold ourselves to account on a regular basis.
Thank you, Mayor. My understanding is that there was a public session and there was also a private session, and what I'm still trying to get my definitive position on is whether the private session was private because the meeting was in quora, or because it was they asked for a session in private to discuss things. So I can come back to you and drop you a note on that.
I can respond to that.
Thank you, Angela.
When some of that feedback was.
And of course, we are always mindful of the request of the Scrutiny Committee Chair, and we'll work with them to whatever works for them. It's a shame more people don't engage when it is in public. So I would say to the public, please do, this is democracy in action, please do watch these committees and get a sense of where money's going and our priorities to support the people of West Yorkshire. Okie doke. Any further comments? Yes, Councillor Poulsen.
Just one quick one on the reserves policy. Just as an MCA and other CAs around the country, do we look at each other's policies and compare and contrast?
To reassure you, yes, is my understanding. But Angela. Thanks. And obviously the M10 is not just the mayors, but all the chief executives, and things do then become more collegiate across the region. So it's a good point. Thank you. So are we all happy to confirm the agreement to the recommendations as set out in the report, pages 25, 26? We are. Lovely. Thank you all so much. So pipeline development and funding priorities. Item 6 provides us with an update on the West Yorkshire investment priorities, and the paper asks us to endorse the direction of travel proposed for the development of the next stage of schemes, take us forwards towards a more inclusive, sustainable and resilient economy that we all want to see. It outlines how we're delivering on the promises of devolution, drawing on the funding streams currently available to us, including Gainshare, UK SPF, CRIS, BSIP, amongst others, to develop a pipeline of projects, which include delivering a region-wide and comprehensive business support programme to drive business growth and support productivity improvements, an extension to our employment support offer, helping people get into new jobs and opportunities, and to support and help homes and businesses decarbonise, contributing to our net zero ambitions and delivering on our climate and environment plan. And support for My Creative New Deal, including backing the Years of Culture across West Yorkshire from Leeds 2023, Kirklees Year of Music, Wakefield and Calderdale's Years of Culture in 2024, culminating in the mighty Bradford, proudly being the UK's City of Culture in 2025. Plenty more outlined in the paper, and clearly we do even more if government were to deepen the devolution settlement, and that's the case that I and the other 5 local authority leaders made to Michael Gove when he came to West Yorkshire at the end of last year, making the case for West Yorkshire to be absolutely the next in line for a trailblazer devolution deal. So the paper in front of us also seeks approval in principle to allocate an additional £5 million of gain share in each of the next 2 years to our 5 local authorities in order to further support pipeline development. So can I invite Alan to introduce the paper further, please?
Thank you, Mayor. So to summarise the paper a little further for members, following the devolution deal, we created the Single Investment Fund, which was a requirement of the devolution deal, which enables us to, as far as possible, bring all our funding into one pot, although, of course, there are multiple constraints around many of the streams. We have developed the West Yorkshire Investment Strategy, which has been agreed by the Combined Authority and is reviewed each year, which sets out what our priorities are, our 6 investment priorities. Since 2020, a key focus has been on the recovery from COVID, so we have approved and implemented many programmes to help grow businesses, support entrepreneurs, enable people to develop skills and support people back into employment. And we've recently complemented those programmes with new programmes to help people to tackle the crisis and the cost of living and doing business. And alongside all of that, we've been developing pipelines of schemes for us to deliver, for instance, through the City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement. It's important to note that the programmes that we develop will be, in many cases, contributing to more than one investment priority, and all programmes have to show how they contribute towards 3 golden threads: growing an inclusive economy, tackling the climate emergency, and promoting equality, diversity, and inclusion. This paper is largely now about moving to the next stage, so setting out our longer-term investment plans. Central to this needs to be a pipeline of overarching programmes and projects which contribute towards the investment priorities, and we want to develop that across the region. Those programmes being ambitious and scalable, and at this stage not being designed to be constrained within a particular level of funding. And the purpose of taking that approach is so that we can, firstly, take advantage of the funding that we already have available to fund any immediate priorities. Secondly, to respond quickly to future funding that becomes available, for instance, due to successful partnering with the private sector or any additional funding that comes from government. And thirdly, enable us to borrow for a defined pipeline of capital schemes, thereby taking advantage of the significant revenue proportion of gain share which was achieved during the negotiations in 2020. So in order to do that, our proposed approach has got some principles which we're proposing. So firstly, that we should aim to, in future, maximise the use of revenue for capital borrowing from 24-25 onwards. That requires us to develop a capital pipeline. Secondly, we recognise the pressure that the CA and local authority budgets are under, so we should continue to safeguard that capacity. Thirdly, that we should continue with the current plan to deliver revenue programmes to support economic recovery and tackle the crisis in the cost of living, but we should keep those programmes under review. And fourthly, that we should focus our work on the priorities and scale back work on programmes that are lower priority. So we're really looking to focus our efforts. So the paper then goes on to propose those areas, the key areas that we feel should be the priority, and it sets out what those potential additional programmes are that contribute towards the achievement of the outcomes set out in the investment strategy. Absolutely crucial to note is that this is about the endorsement of the direction of travel for the development of programmes. It is not seeking for funding to be allocated to those programmes at the moment, although there are some indicative figures proposed. So the paper sets out for each priority the key outcomes. So for instance, increase in high growth startups to create new jobs, reducing digital exclusion, creating new homes and employment sites, a range of programmes to take forward priorities in our climate and environment plan, the work required to develop the next stage of bus reform, and support for our regional cultural festivals, plus work to increase the diversity of people engaging in culture and working in that industry. Important to note that all of these programmes will be brought forward in the future through the assurance framework as appropriate, and that's when more of the detail around the costs and outcomes will be available. Second important thing to note is that whilst gain share could be a funding source for some of these programmes, it is not the only source of funding. So the focus is on setting out what we're trying to achieve by way of outcomes and what we want to do, and then we can arrange the funding to follow that. The paper then deals with two further matters. So it informs the Combined Authority about work required to prepare us for the upcoming gateway reviews of the West Yorkshire Transport Fund and gain share. And secondly, it seeks, as the Mayor said, approval for a further £5 million of capacity funding to be allocated to the local authorities to assist with the development of those pipelines. So 3 recommendations by way of conclusion: seeking endorsement of the direction of travel of the development of the programmes to contribute towards our investment priorities. Secondly, seeking agreement in principle for the capacity funding for local authorities. And thirdly, to delegate any further decisions on that to the Finance, Resources and Corporate Committee. Very happy to take any questions. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Can I just say how pleased I am to see this paper and how hard it's been, because the future is so uncertain, and to try and identify priorities when you're not quite sure if we're going to get extra money, but having the focus absolutely on what our intended outcomes are for the people of West Yorkshire, it has been really tricky. So thank you for the work. Any questions or comments? Councillor Goulton.
Thanks, Chair. It's on the investment priority number 3, creating great places and accelerated infrastructure, and the Employment Sites Accelerator Fund. This is a very interesting one. It's got quite a small amount of money associated with it, though. And it's the one that mentions the potential for mayoral investment structures to be set up. I just wonder Was this meant to be in response to the government wishing to pursue investment zones and levelling up fund bids, or was it something that we were wanting to deliver independently of that? And have we identified the sites?
Thank you. Alan? And then I'll come to you, Liz.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks for the question, Councillor. So the amount of money, this is largely revenue funding to help to prepare sites, or rather to support the development of business cases and project work. It's clear that capital funding would be required as well. This is not directly necessarily a response to the government's position on investment zones, and in particular, the government previously announced a policy on investment zones, which they've since withdrawn, and they are now developing a new proposal around investment zones, and we need to engage with government about what that looks like. So this is a piece of work that we proactively need to do to support the development of sites across the region, and it's not solely about places that might be investment zones in the future. It's a broader set of sites. Not just what the government had previously described as investment zones. Liz may wish to come in further.
Thank you. So just to build on what you said and answer about the question about kind of where are the sites. So there's a few things going on. So one, Place Committee have agreed what's called strategic priority areas, which the Combined Authority, I can't remember which month it was last year, but gave the approval for Place Committee to go ahead and do that. So we have some identified priority areas, and they're the areas that we are going to look at in terms of what's the right delivery mechanism, which is what your kind of first part of your question. In terms of the Accelerator Fund, we're likely to focus on those strategic priority areas, but not be exclusive. So we're working with our partner councils at the moment to look at what that pipeline might be. You're right, it's not a vast amount of money. As Alan says, it's revenue funding to try and kind of unlock the sites to kind of come forward, either through the capital money that we might secure in the future, or to become viable for the private sector to develop.
Thank you, Liz.
Supplementary, when will those 5 priority areas be made public, and when will it be discussed whether or not they would require a mayoral development corporation to develop them?
Good question. So the team are working on a business case at the moment. So at the moment, this paper is suggesting the types of things the team should work on. In order to unlock the money that you see here, we'll need to create and develop a business case which will come through the assurance framework. I don't have a month in mind, but the team are looking at that plan at the moment.
Also, it might be reassuring to know that the investment zones that are now going to be clustered around universities, as mayors, having thoughts about how we can support government's ambitions by not having defined ring-fenced plot of land that is the zone, but actually there are areas across the whole of West Yorkshire that could be identified as part of an ambitious zone. So it's all movable at the moment. As you know, the government changed their mind about one thing. We're hoping that we get more information about this new version of the investment zones very soon, so we can be on the front foot and deliver for government something that they could then see as an exciting opportunity and a creative solution to the problem that they've found themselves in. Any further comments? Okie doke. So are we happy to approve the recommendations as set out, those 3 areas around endorsing the present, the projects and capacity fund, and then delegations? Good, thank you all so much. Okie dokie, let's move on now to bus service funding update. This sets out the challenges our bus service budgets face over the coming years. The government's intending to end the bus recovery grant in March with no indication that further revenue support will be provided beyond next month. I and other mayors are urging the Secretary of State to provide long-term funding to local transport authorities and bus companies outside of London. Transport for London has quite rightly had revenue support over the medium term, which will provide protection for London's public transport. What we're asking for is the same approach is taken to regions outside of the capital, and we will continue to press on that over the course of the next few days and weeks. If the funding's not forthcoming, bus operators have said they'll withdraw services. Some communities risk losing their bus service from April, and frustratingly, the Combined Authority has limited financial capacity to save them all. We do, of course, have funding linked to our bus service improvement plan, which was intended to begin the transformation of our bus services into the London-style network our region truly needs. But without extra support, we'll need to consider how this is deployed to stabilise the network instead. The Mayor's fares, reducing single journeys to £2 across West Yorkshire and capping daily fares at £4.50, was part of that plan. And so I'm delighted to announce that the assessment of the first 3 months of the Mayor's fares has shown that 7.2 million journeys have benefited from them since they were introduced in September. And the early success of Mayor's fares shows there is an appetite for well-priced bus travel in West Yorkshire. And passengers in West Yorkshire have saved around £3.6 million since the reduced fares were introduced. Really important to our communities facing a cost of living crisis, and I'm proud we have been able to help people at a time when they need it the most. The analysis also shows that bus usage has grown from 81% of pre-pandemic levels in May 2022 to 87% in December, and really welcome growth since Mayor's Fares was introduced. Now, these figures weren't available before the paper was published, but will be formally reported to the Transport Committee later this month. But I want to encourage as many people as possible in our region to use greener and more sustainable ways of getting around. And we need to see the bus operators do their bit and work hard to recruit drivers and ensure services are as reliable as they can be. And can I thank everybody in West Yorkshire that has got on a bus, because at times it has been frustrating when buses disappear or services are cancelled. But thank you for committing with me to ensure that we have a greener, cleaner bus network. So the Mayor's Fares is another key step on our journey to bring buses back into public control. I want to create a public transport renaissance in West Yorkshire, but clearly some big challenges we face if we're to deliver on that ambition. So on that note, I'm really pleased I got you before you have to go, Councillor Hinchcliffe. Can I hand over to Councillor Hinchcliffe, Chair of the Transport Committee, to provide further commentary.
Thanks very much, Mayor. And yes, really great news about the Mayor's Fares and that it's supported people through a really difficult cost of living crisis. And obviously, as we go into the future, there is still a cost of living crisis out there, and it is very challenging for people, and we would urge government to continue funding, as you suggested. I am concerned about the bus recovery grant ending end of March. And, you know, we heard earlier on about from the Local Enterprise Partnership Chair the importance of transport in economic growth. If you cut back on investment in transport, then obviously the economy can't grow. And I really would urge governments, when they're looking at settlements going forward, that they continue funding the bus services to the same degree. Otherwise, the Combined Authority cannot actually fund the bus network, and that is going to really inhibit our economic growth. So if there's one thing the government needs to fund, obviously for economic growth purposes, is transport. The infrastructure that we need, and we all need that infrastructure going forward over the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years, you know, so the future, but the here and now as well, you know, it is very short notice not to be able to tell us at the end of March whether it's going to continue or not. And that hiatus means it's very difficult to plan and difficult for people to live their lives and go to work, and will they be able to get to work in a few months' time where they're using that bus service now. So I think, you know, some urgency from the government in addressing this issue is really required at the moment, and I'd welcome your intervention on that. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to say that we're finding a date in the diary for the Minister to talk about transport, because whilst the headlines often are about TransPennine or trains, the majority of people who use public transport use buses, and we want to make sure they have an opportunity to do that across our region. Before I come to Dave, Councillor Waller.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to thank Councillor Hinchcliffe for the work that she's been doing on buses that cross boundaries, and recognising that it's an issue that affects a broader area, and we're happy to join with the lobbying of government that we should be getting the same support for buses as London gets. And I share the concerns in the paper with regard to schools and getting pupils to their school on time is an increasing worry going ahead because of the way the fragility of the bus system is operating. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Waller. And we all know that the government have introduced 3 months, potentially they're going to extend it, of £2 bus fares. I'm glad they stole our idea. We were ahead of the game. And I hope that then, as they analyse the outcomes of that £2 fare, they will see firsthand how cutting services does not help when you are introducing cheaper fares, because for some communities, the service they depended on has had to be cut because companies have taken the decision to cut a route. So I'm hoping government will start to understand also, now it's cross-boundary, that we have an opportunity to work together to make sure we have that transformational network. Councillor Galton, you wanted to come in.
Yes, thanks, Mayor. I've been surprised a little by the figures that you mentioned earlier, because I asked for those on the 11th of January from Dave Pearson, and I copied in Ben Still, and I still haven't had a reply to that email. And I had my briefing this week after the papers were published, and so I assumed that information might have been available at that time, because I was as keen as you, Mayor, to understand what impact the Mayor's fares have had on bus journeys. And I sent a report that was in the Yorkshire Post, where the South Yorkshire Mayor, Oliver Coppard, had been able to provide those figures, and I assumed we were measuring them at the same time as he was. So I'm just disappointed it's being brought to our attention in this informal manner right now. Because one of the things that I wanted to check on that was how the bus journey performance had been evaluated against, for instance, pre-pandemic levels as well, so that we can get a good idea about value for money from the Mayor's fares. And if it's confirmed, that we therefore send that off to government, as you've said, as part of our business case to get even more support for our bus services. On the issue of March 2023 and the point where the government stopped subsidising, on paragraph 2.4 it says that we'll be given a report from Councillor Peter Carlill of his discussions with bus operators, but I don't see him here. So I'm assuming it will come from an officer instead. And lastly, on the bus service improvement plan, I did mention at the last meeting that we were very, very quick and off the mark in getting Mayor's fares implemented as one half of that plan. But I've seen no dynamism in trying to convert the second half, which is 35 million quid's worth, to address the needs of those bus passengers that find themselves at bus stops suffering ghost buses and cancellations, and who are not able to fully enjoy the benefits of the Mayor's fares because they don't have the confidence to go to a bus stop in the first place. And I would have thought that we'd have had some progress on that second half of BSIP being applied to address those pressures.
Thank you, Councillor Galton. And all councillors are treated with respect, and of course any information that is available would be shared in a timely fashion, and I can't imagine there is any reason why information is withheld. This has been late coming, and that's why it's going to the Transport Committee after this meeting, because we wanted to get it out in a timely fashion so we could discuss it. But Dave, do you want to come in?
Yes, a couple of points on the report, and also to address some of the questions that Councillor Galton's just asked. On the Mayor's fares data, we have been a little bit beset by validating some of the data we get from bus operators. So I recognise that it feels it's taken longer, and it has definitely taken longer than our colleagues in South Yorkshire. The intention was always to bring that to Transport Committee, which is next Friday, and the papers for the Transport Committee and the information will be published later today. So we're sort of on track with that, but happy to send Councillor Galton a reply to the original email to confirm those figures now that we have them. On the paper in 2.4, again, as Councillor Galton's just mentioned, the committee are promised an update on the conversations which we're having with bus operators regarding what their intentions will be should the government funding not continue beyond the end of March. I can inform you that as those discussions are continuing, Councillor Carlisle, as has been said, has been part of those discussions, and again we will bring this back to the Transport Committee next week. But just to give you a little bit of a headline, I mean we are looking at 7 bus services that are completely at risk of full withdrawal, and another 35 that will be reduced in some form or other, whether by frequency, route changes, or time of day of operation. So that's the sort of magnitude of the intentions of bus operators should the funding come to an end. Some of those services, they are flagging that even with funding are marginal and are sort of identifying them as loss-making. So those discussions continue, and obviously we will come back to the Transport Committee with Councillor Carlisle there as well to give members an update on that. Likewise, on the bus service improvement plan, again, the Combined Authority has delegated the bus service improvement plan to Transport Committee. It is absolutely recognised, I think, both by yourself, the Mayor, and Councillor Galton, that this money is to a certain extent is part of the bus funding that we're dealing with, and that it is and was always intended that it funds the transformation, but what we will be looking at is the first stage of that, it being necessary to stabilise the current instability in the bus network that we experience at the moment because of the uncertainty around funding, and again that's something we can discuss in some detail at the Transport Committee next week. Thank you. Thank you,
Dave, and certainly it's about partnerships and working with the bus operators, for example, around data, has been a challenge. Identifying also and collating the Mayor's Big Bus Chat. This isn't about our plan, it's about the people's plan, and it's one of the most extensive consultations we've had to get an idea of where people want their buses to go, and getting that data together has been invaluable. But we are trying to build a network when all around us, their foundations are being dug out by companies who are cutting routes. So it is in a very challenging landscape, given what we hoped for just a year ago about what that money would be used for. But certainly we'll make sure that the updates come thick and fast. And Councillor Hinchcliffe, do you want to come in about Transport Committee?
Thank you, yes. Just because you're not there, Councillor Galton, doesn't mean these things aren't discussed. So Transport Committee discuss this on a regular basis, and we're doing a huge amount of work for it about it. Every committee, this comes up, and we're looking at a new network, what the principles around the new network would be. But of course, as the Mayor's already alluded to, if BSIP is going to have to fund some of the network which the government are no longer going to fund, then it becomes a less aspirational amount of money and more like keeping business as usual, which is not what we want, actually. So until we can figure out what the impacts of the government cuts are going to be on the current bus network, it's very difficult to make that decision on how BSIP is going to be spent. And Councillor Carlisle is actually still trying to finalise some of those details with the bus operators to be able to share those and discuss those, obviously with the Transport Committee. So the Transport Committee, just to reassure you, does an awful lot of work in this space. It is a cross-party group of councillors from all over the region, and they take their job very seriously and are giving this the due diligence that it absolutely deserves. But it is difficult in a landscape when government won't tell us, what's going to happen next month, never mind next year.
And that's why we're angling and campaigning for the London style funding, where we can have stability, so then we can start to build our transformational plan. But in this landscape, when we're staggering from bus recovery grant funding to cuts to the next lump sum, it is no way to run a network. So we need that stability, and that's why all the mayors have come together to ask government for that stability, because it is not just a problem facing us in West Yorkshire, but across the whole of the north. Yes, Councillor Paulson.
Thank you. Just a couple of points. On the patronage, I think the figures you said, the updated ones were 87% patronage now on the buses, pre-COVID numbers. I'm just wanting to get a feel from officers where they think this is going. Obviously, it's going up, but I mean, are we reaching the peak now? Are we going to get back to 100%? And from research, you know, where are the people not coming back to the buses from? Is there certain communities, sectors, whatever, you know, what our research is indicating on that? And also, it might be useful, we were successful in the Levelling Up Fund for the 41 million for buses that the Combined Authority submitted, which I'm sure we all really welcome around this table. I think it was a July report where there were some details of what that funding bid was for, but it might be useful just to bring out some of the key points of what that's going to be used for, because there are some alternate members on the committee today. Thank you. Thank you.
And if I may say, Councillor Paulson, you will, I'm sure, share my frustration that some excellent bids from Bradford got nowhere in the Lough round. 6 bids from Leeds got nowhere. So whilst of course we really welcome this money for buses, it's quite a state of affairs when we're in the bottom ranking, when our need is so great that whilst I really am grateful that Batley got some money for the High Street and we've got some funding, it is definitely not enough and it does not match our ambition. Before I bring Dave in, can I bring in Councillor Pandor?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and thank you to the officers who are doing exceptional work in very difficult circumstances. I don't want to start digressing into the details of the report. What I want to do is what I'm here for, representing my constituents. And it worries me that at the end of March, we might not have any support for the bus service that we are trying to sustain. So we need to do everything we can to get government to actually continue the support we need, because we are still not out of the woods yet. Despite that, the support we're getting, the biggest things that I face within my council is my councillors, my residents coming to me and saying that we can't get a bus. The service is not working, it's broken, and we need a long-term sustainable solution, because residents can't get around, businesses can't function, we've got big ambitions, big aspirations, but if the system is broken under the current system, and despite the fact that officers are working extremely hard, they've got a given set of variables, and something's got to work. To me, it's very, very clear, Mayor, which is, I'm sure you will agree, that it's a public service. It's not a profit-making enterprise, and that's what we are seeing. For the last 13 years, things haven't improved, and I think now time is right to actually get our heads around this properly and start to actually put that case forward to government, saying that the system is broken, and the only way that we can actually solve this is to actually really look at the complete situation regarding how the law governs the contracting arrangements. We will help them in this, we will support them, and the bottom line is the residents are completely and utterly, I'll try and be polite, baffled right here in why we can't sort this problem out. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, and as always, an advocate for your community. Thank you so much. And Dave, to Councillor Poulton's questions regarding cohorts and so on.
Yes, it's quite an interesting situation actually, because it sort of, if you try to delve into the sort of 87% picture, and what's happened to bus patronage since the pandemic, and particularly in the last year or so, since the restrictions started to fall away. On the positive side, bus use by under 19s is increased, and it's probably slightly higher than it was in 2019, and we see that coming through, and that may be partly because in the midst of the pandemic, we actually changed the fare structure for young people back in 21. And so that might be a contributing factor. But young people are using the buses, and that's a good positive. In terms of where the passenger cohorts are not sort of catching up with pre-pandemic, I think one's fairly self-evident in terms of the commuting into towns and cities. Reasonably buoyant Tuesday, Wednesdays, Thursdays, not so Mondays and Fridays. That looks like a longer term pattern, I think, in terms of how people travel. You can see that in all sorts of aspects of how the towns and city centres are performing, how offices are being occupied, and things like that. So I think that's probably a long-term factor that needs to be taken into consideration. I think the other thing we're also seeing is that bus use by people who use the free bus pass is actually trailing behind the fare-paying adults, and there's probably a number of sort of socio-demographic lifestyle issues that might sit behind that, as well as a reflection on their confidence in bus services. But obviously that'll be part of it as well. But we're seeing generally the people who are using the free bus pass tracking at 5 to 10% less than the growth we're seeing in the adult passengers. And so that's an interesting sort of observation in terms of the overall numbers of people. I'm going to hand on to Dave Haskins now to explain the Levelling Up Fund bid.
Okay, thanks. I mean, you requested some more detail on what the Love Bid's about. The first thing I'd say is we have prepared a briefing note which is being finalised at this moment today, and we'll be sending that out to members because there has been a number of requests for what the information is within that. But if I give a very, very brief overview, conscious of time here, I mean, the bid that was announced that the Combined Authority was successful for was a 41.25 million Love funding. The overall total package cost is about 47.25, and the extra money there comes from 4 million as agreed through the gain share and 2 million from the West Yorkshire Transport Fund. Now the package itself is made up of three things: two particular projects and one, we call it the West Yorkshire Bus Journey Improvement Scheme, which is a wide-ranging package of measures looking from the beginning to the end of the journey, access to jobs, training and other services. So this involves upgrading bus stations and bus stops in key routes, reducing barriers to accessing the bus networks, and tackling key points of delays to services. So that first element of it around the wider work, which I say is spread across all of West Yorkshire, is about 25.4 million, made up of nearly 5 million of hotspots, bus hotspots, and about 9 million of bus station improvements, and about 11.4 million, including accessibility improvements to bus stops. So that's the first part. The second part is two specific schemes which are targeted journey improvements on two corridors. And these are corridors which were part of other programmes, but through the inflation were effectively put on reserve lists initially. And the first one's in North Halifax on the A629 corridor from Ogden to Orange Street roundabout. This is around bus priority, traffic signals, other junction improvements, benefiting buses, general traffic, pedestrians, and also a cycle route as well as part of that. And that's 8.7 million. And the second project is the A639 Park Road in Pontefract. Again, bus priority improvement through some traffic signal junction upgrades, some quiet cycle route alternatives, and pedestrian cycle crossings. And that's about 13 million of improvements, 13.2, sorry. So as I say, we will provide a briefing note on that in more detail, which we're just preparing now.
That would be incredibly welcome, and I think the focus on active travel, on safety, on reliability for buses with those designated bus lanes, I think is going to be really part of our vision to have that safer, cleaner, greener, more reliable bus network. Thank you. So do you know when we might have that briefing note? So any minute now. Thank you so much, and a great question. Thank you, Councillor Paulson. Okie doke. So are we happy to note the actions taken to manage bus service costs? We are. Lovely. Thank you so much. Righto, let's move on to item 8. This report notes some of the progress made on the adult education budget in the first year. You'll know it's been devolved to the Combined Authority, 65 million, and asks the Combined Authority to approve 2 recommendations regarding the use of funding. The first proposal has been recommended by the Employment and Skills Committee and proposes an increase to the AEB rate for providers. This is aimed to address the government's pre-devolution decision to freeze the funding rate for the last decade, supporting our providers to invest in a high-quality offer for our West Yorkshire residents. Similar decisions are being taken across the Mayoralties, the West Midlands, Greater Manchester and London, where AEB is devolved. The further education sector has suffered significant cuts from government over the last decade. Without this uplift in funding rates, providers report a genuine concern they'd have had to reduce their offer to learners in West Yorkshire, reducing hours of courses, increasing class sizes, and reducing teaching assistant support. Some providers may have even to stop provision, which is no longer viable. This is clearly not a situation we could have accepted, as it would have reduced the quality of adult education provision in West Yorkshire, and that's why it's important we take this decision today. The second proposal is to continue the residential uplift next year, whilst we review and develop a new model which reflects value for money. This approach is in line with our colleagues in South Yorkshire. Now, there's only one provider who will be affected by this, and we'll work alongside them to establish a more cost-effective model to support communities across the region. So if I may, I'll hand over to Councillor James Lewis as Chair of the Employment and Skills Committee to discuss this further.
Thank you, Mayor. You've covered the main points in the report, so I won't repeat what you said. I'd just add, I think the recommendations in this paper reflect the lengthy discussions that we've had at the Employment and Skills Committee with both providers and employers about making sure that we're taking the right decision on the adult education budget uplift. And as you mentioned, it is in line with other combined authorities that have had this particular funding stream devolved to them as well, to make sure we've got the quality there for learners to come through. Just want to flag up one success around devolving the adult education budget to us, which is just in the time it's been with us, we've been able to save over £1 million in administration fees through reducing subcontracting arrangements, and that money has gone directly into supporting learners. So it is, there are already some real benefits about the devolution of this, Mayor.
Thank you. And we know, don't we, how important further education is for engaging disadvantaged communities and increasing participation from ethnic minorities and those people on a low wage. Fully funded up to the real living wage to upskill, with management fees saved, as you said, and reinvested in learning. So any thoughts on the adult education budget increase? It's really important for our further education colleges. We know how they've been the poor relation to universities, and they deliver such life-changing courses for people in our community. Any comments? No, we're all happy to agree the recommendations. That is brilliant. Thank you all very, very much. So moving on to the LEP governance, item 9. Now, you may remember Levelling Up White Paper, when it was published last year, provided clarity that for LEPs within mayoral combined authority areas, LEPs would be integrated into the MCA. And following this, in July 2022, a LEP integration plan for West Yorkshire was submitted to government. We finally received approval of our plan with no changes to it, and this paper sets out the steps that are required to fully integrate the LEP into the CA, including the governance changes required and impact on recruitment of the new LEP chair and board members. And before I come to colleagues, to officers Alan and Caroline, to answer questions, could I ask Mark to say a few words?
Thank you, Mayor. And just for this paper, whilst no decision is being asked for about the LEP chair recruitment and remuneration, and so it might not require a full declaration of interest, I think for full transparency, I'd just like it to be recorded that I don't propose to take part in any future discussions about remuneration or the role profile for the LEP chair. Of course, I will comment about matters of LEP integration and governance. And I think on that, just to say, whilst we submitted the LEP integration paper on the 27th of July, and it was quite a long time waiting for the formal confirmation to government, it feels great that they have recognised that our plans make sense, that we are very much embedded as an independent business voice into the committees, and they're very supportive of doing so. Now we just need to get on with it and continue, making this area the best place to start, grow and scale a business.
Thank you, and I'm really looking forward to LEP members being more actively engaged across the community, working with me to deliver the outcomes that we all share. And I would like to put on record my thanks to all of those private sector members who take time out to come and give their experience and smarts to support our ambitions across West Yorkshire. And also to you, Mark, for your great leadership as interim to get us to this point where we've got a government who agree how we can integrate the LEP into the MCA. Any questions for Alan or Caroline? No, we're all happy with that integration. Thank you so much. So we all agree with the recommendations. Brilliant. Thanks very much. So moving on to the Assurance Framework Annual Review, item 10. This item reports on progress on the annual review of the Leeds City Region Local Framework and requests that the CA review and approve the proposed revisions to Leeds City Region Assurance Framework. Any comments on this? I'm assuming it will come to yourself, Caroline, if there are any comments. Oh, I'm so sorry. The changes in our new organisation structure. Melanie, would you like to make any comments from what we see in the paper?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So we have to have a local assurance framework in place. Ours was originally developed in 2015 and it was a requirement of government to receive the growth deal funding. So any funding that is coming through from government to the Combined Authority or the LEP, or that flows through the Combined Authority or the LEP, needs to adhere to the assurance framework. So it's here to make sure that we have the right systems and processes in place, to make sure that we're managing our funding effectively and to ensure the successful delivery of the Strategic Economic Framework and the West Yorkshire Investment Strategy. We need to ensure that we're getting value for money on our programmes and our projects. And it also demonstrates our transparency in decision making and the consistent approach to that. We're required to update annually. Usually we need to take into account the government guidance that comes out on an annual basis. There wasn't any government guidance issued this year, but we have made a couple of minor amendments to the assurance framework just to be clear about delegations for the adult education budget and also the multiply funding. So we've set out in paragraph 1.4, there's just a couple of changes there. I guess so we're asking if members can approve those changes. I guess what's more exciting is what we've got planned coming up in terms of looking at this in a little bit more detail. So we've established a network group of assurance leads across the MCAs nationally, and we would like to look at peer reviews. So we've started those conversations. We will also be going back to our partners to discuss the assurance framework and how it works, and we are constantly looking at how we can update it, how we can make it more flexible, how we can make it more agile. So we will continue to have those conversations with partners, and the proposal is that we'll bring a revised version back to the Combined Authority later on this year for consideration.
Thank you. And could I encourage partners to please engage with this process? I do hear that there are challenges around the assurance process, and I've tasked Melanie with ensuring that we have the most agile assurance process of the MCAs, where we can deliver outcomes at speed, where there is no blockage within the process to get projects underway and to start to deliver for the people we represent. Because, as we all know, there's no point having great ideas if then they screech to a halt because things are just piled up, or we haven't understood how we can be more fleet of foot when it comes to these assurance sign-offs. But having said that, we can't forget that we must show value for money, otherwise government will start to challenge us, and we absolutely don't want that. We are proud of our own assurance process, but we want it to be fit for purpose going forward with this new focus on delivery. So thank you, Melanie. Any comments from anyone? No? Thank you all. That's fantastic. So moving on, we're all happy to approve that. So moving on to project approvals. which is item 11A. Investment priority 1, good jobs and resilient businesses. This report provides details of 2 schemes recommended to the MCA for progression through the assurance process. I would like, if possible, for Councillor Pandor to provide a few comments, and I'll go over to Phil Wycherley.
Thank you very much, Mayor. The report's actually got Councillor James Lewis's name, but I think we've managed to correct that. It should be presented by myself, hence my presentation. A very quick note. Firstly, the first scheme for the High Growth Enterprise Partnership Scheme, this will support startups for businesses that are under 3 years old across West Yorkshire. The support will include financial loans or grants and targeted business advice, and support and complement our wider enterprise programme. So that's the first one, High Growth Enterprise Entrepreneurship Scheme. And the second is a digital enterprise, part of the UK Shared Prosperity Fund scheme. It will provide growth and scale up opportunities for SMEs through investing in digital technologies. And it's especially important that we actually do invest in this area, and for West Yorkshire to become the best of the best, because digital is the future, and there are jobs out there which we don't even know what they'll be. So if we actually get ahead of the game, we'll actually be way ahead of other regions, and this will form part of the overall objective in terms of making sure that we are actually best of the best in terms of Mayoral Combined Authority. And it's important to note that this is the only digital grant for businesses of this kind that we've got. So that's just a quick summary. Happy to take any questions. There's some recommendations as well that are in the report. I'd like to move them. But before I do that, can I ask Phil to just cover anything in detail that I've not captured? So Phil, over to you.
Thank you, Councillor Pandor. So I'll just outline the decisions we're asking to take today. We're asking to progress through the assurance framework. So there's 2 schemes in here, one of which is the High Growth Startup Scheme. This aims to support businesses, as Councillor Pandor said, that are under 3 years old across West Yorkshire. And these are businesses that will be identified to us through Business West Yorkshire and other routes, who have the potential to be growing kind of 20% year on year for up to 3 years, and tries to address 3 areas of market failure, around low business birth rates, business survival rates, and particularly access to finance. And this new scheme really focuses on access to finance part, and the majority of the funding here is designed to go to businesses, not kind of the running of the scheme. So what it's going to do is it's going to provide information, brokerage support to businesses, access to training, but crucially kind of financial assistance for a range of loans and grants to help those businesses grow. This scheme, because we obviously have our enterprise programme, our 6 million enterprise programme that we're already in train, that was developed during our COVID recovery phase. And when that was developed, there was a scheme similar to this already in train. So this scheme was developed around that. That scheme was funded by European funding. That funding finishes this financial year. So this is about replacing that, but we're not replacing it with a like for like. We've looked at the evaluation of this, and we've looked at how we challenge that to make improvements. And some of the kind of new elements of this is that the new scheme is half the level of funding, because we've attracted funding from outside through both the Prince's Trust and the Business Enterprise Fund to support this. And also this will be available not just to businesses, but business to consumer businesses, so it will benefit a wide range of businesses. We've also looked at kind of the efficiency of the scheme. So our target value is kind of 4k per business, but when we compare across the country with similar schemes, it's often multiples of that in terms of the kind of support we provide businesses. So that's the business growth scheme. Just to talk about the Prince's Trust element of it, because it's the part that links most closely to the wider enterprise programme that we've got, and that's working with up to 450 entrepreneurs under the age of 30. So we're making sure that kind of links to our diverse entrepreneurship scheme that we've commissioned from here to make sure there's links, particularly kind of on ensuring we have diversity in our business leaders, and that's a great group to focus on there. The second scheme is called the Digital Enterprise Scheme. Again, and this is so the the high growth startup scheme is going to be funded by the proposal here is by GainShare. This is going to be funded by UK SPF. So this will be a digital scheme which helps two different types of businesses invest in both their digital infrastructure but making the most of that and transforming. And as Councillor Pandor said, the government in the last couple of months have dropped their own programme which they ran nationally called Help to Grow Digital. So this is the only thing like this that will be available to West Yorkshire businesses that aren't kind of high growth manufacture and advanced manufacturing or digital specific businesses. So there'll be two kind of things, one of which is a what we call level grant funding. So this is kind of the more generic offer available for around 450 businesses, which will be up to 50% or maximum £10,000 grant for those businesses to help them digitally transform. And there'll also be a limited number of around 30 more high value, high impact grants, which will be worth between 25,000 and 100,000, with similar kind of contribution rates, but the contribution being capped at 35,000, and that's all aimed at kind of helping our businesses digitally transform. And again, the combined authority funding is about half of the overall funding, and that combined authority funding is coming from the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. With both of these funds, as is always the case when we're contracting out our provision, as we do with most or many of our business support schemes, we'll be keeping kind of a tight monitoring of how the schemes are performing and how they're delivering, and we'll be looking to work with the providers to kind of evolve these schemes, both to make sure they continue to provide the best support to businesses, but also because it's plain to see we're not in a kind of like a stable kind of economic environment. Things are changing quite rapidly, so these things will need to evolve. And these proposals have been discussed at BEAC, but also we'll continue to monitor these through BEAC as well and have that oversight through that. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Phil. Any comments? Councillor Paul.
Now, pretend I'm Councillor Robinson, but I'm sure he would say absolutely welcome to Digital Enterprise Scheme and is fully supportive of that, which I am as well, but I know it is his particular baby, so to speak. And both schemes sound really great, and obviously it does look like the high growth one is going to be a bit more flexible for who can get involved with it than the previous European scheme. So that's definitely something to be welcome, Councillor Galton, isn't it?
Brexit benefit.
But no, I think they're both great schemes and fully support them. Thank you.
Thank you for that contribution. It's really welcome. And Councillor Pandor.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I was hoping Councillor Robinson would be here because he's just done fantastic work. He knows this subject inside out. So I do look forward to working with him and hopefully tap into his expertise because he's an expert in this area. Thank you, Mayor.
Terrific. So all happy to approve the recommendations. Great stuff. So moving swiftly on to project approval, investment priority 3, creating great places and accelerated infrastructure. This is 4 schemes recommended to the CA for progression, and 2 schemes going through the Place Committee. I'll come to you, Liz, as Councillor Jeffries isn't here, and to outline the 4 schemes for consideration. Thank you. And it's so great to be able to be passing these schemes through the CA to start, to continue getting stuff done and money into our communities to make change. So, Liz.
Thank you, Mayor. So this is in 2 halves. So flooding first, and then the place-related schemes. So firstly, on flooding, this combined authority has previously already invested in flooding, and therefore through the 20 million growth deal funding previously has protected businesses and homes. So this is about the next phase of the flooding pipeline. And what we want to be able to do at this stage is to develop the business cases. So this is the early stage development funding we're asking for your approval for today. For the team to be able to go away and look at the list of schemes they've already got that they've been working with the districts on, refresh that, and then begin the business case work on those individual schemes to bring it back through the assurance process. So very much looking for you today to agree the development funding of £113,735. And also to get your agreement that we have a view of utilising £10 million to look at the first phase of this, but obviously that's subject to further assurance coming forward. So that's the first kind of recommendation. Shall I do the second one and we'll take flooding together? So the second approval It's a contribution of 12.565 million to the Leeds Flood Alleviation Scheme. Again, this combined authority will be familiar with this scheme as it has provided funding in the past. The project is on site. It is currently being progressed, but as with the economic situation that many of people have already talked about today, there have been cost inflations. So we took advantage of, just before Christmas, Bayes got in touch with us to invite us at very short notice to apply for funding. I think this was one of the shortest timescales I think we might have ever had.
How long was it, Liz? A week?
Yeah, less than a week to be able to say, do you want some funding? Oh, and by the way, you have to spend it by the end of this financial year, by the end of March. So that's fairly limited, therefore, in terms of what we can do. We put forward the scheme, and Bayes indicated that they would fund it. However, there was a couple of outstanding questions which we went back to them on a couple of weeks ago, and we're still waiting for that confirmation. So I have to be clear with the committee today that if you agree to this, and hopefully you will, it will still be subject to that Bayes agreement happening. But clearly, if we have to spend it by the end of March, then there's not a great deal of time. But the scheme is on site and able to be completed if we approve this money today.
Thank you. And that's why the capacity funding for local authorities is so important, because we've got to be in a place where we have projects that are worked up to a point when governments say, oh, I've got some leftover money, I'm going to share it out across MCAs. What can you deliver at speed in 2 months? We've got projects, so it's really important. Could I just ask something, Liz, about our oversight of apprentices and so on when we're approving these sorts of projects? What sort of authority do we have to say, can we just make sure that it's local people get these jobs to create these big schemes, and there are programmes for apprentices?
Thank you. So this is a project which is being led by Leeds Council, and I know that they look at social value as part of their contract management. I don't know the numbers for this scheme, and obviously with the extra money that we're giving now, that won't have an impact on what they're currently doing, because it's the people are there and employed and already building it. But in my next approvals, I can give you some examples of how we have worked with the contractors to try and look at apprenticeships coming through. So we do that.
Super. Are we all happy to approve those two schemes? We are. Lovely. Thank you so much. So Liz, on to the next two.
Thank you. So just to say that the Place Committee have already discussed these projects and would have been able to approve them, but unfortunately they weren't quite quorate on the day through illness. So the Place Committee had a conversation, and I'm sure Councillor Jeffrey, if she was here today, would hopefully recommend these to be taken forward, because the Place Committee did. So there's two schemes. One is Armley Tower Works in Leeds. This is 50 homes which will be 100% affordable. Again, some of you might know the site, and the applicant is seeking £932,775,000 to enable the scheme to progress. And in this example, it's supporting 6 apprenticeships, and the BCR is 1.4, which represents an acceptable value for money for the Brownfield Housing Programme. I'll do the second one and then happy to take questions. The second one is Garlam House, which is creating 77 new apartments in a former textile warehouse that's been vacant for a number of years in Bradford city centre. 1.2 million is being sought from the Brownfield Housing Fund. The apartments will be for rent, so therefore the building and its maintenance will be retained by the developer. Again, this is providing local economic benefits, including 9 new building management jobs and a number of apprenticeships as well. The BCR of this is 1.1, so again it's categorised as acceptable from the Brownfield Housing Fund programme. And then there's just a last approval, which is previously the combined authority delegated to the Director of Delivery to make changes to the pipeline around brownfield housing. And I'd like that to be transferred to me, if that's okay, in the new directorate structure, so to the Director of Policing Environment in place. So those are the approvals. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Could I just ask about Galeham House? Are they affordable rents, or is it, are they high-end? Do you know anything about that?
It's a good question. I'm just looking to see if I've got that.
Maybe you can feed that back to me separately. Thank you. Are we all okay to approve those, or do we have comments? Any comments? No. So are we all okay to approve those 3 recommendations? brilliant. Thank you all so very much. That's brilliant. And getting those spades in the ground is the gift that keeps on giving. So thank you for pushing those through. Project approvals, investment priority 5, future transport. And this is 5 schemes recommended by the MCA for progression through the assurance process. Councillor Hinchcliffe, would you like to make any comments on these? And I'll then come to Dave Haskins.
And I'll pass it to Dave, really. I think there's just a few transport schemes on the end which went through the Transport Committee and here for noting today, as well as the ones for review. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
Okay, I'll introduce this item. As you say, there's 5 projects coming through, or programmes, I should say, coming through for approval here. I'll take the first one. Then the next 3 are as a bit of an overview of the next 3 because they kind of come as a batch, but we'll talk about that. The first one is a transformational scheme in North East Calderdale, which has come through the CRSTS, that's the City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement. This was originally identified through the West Yorkshire Transport Fund through what we call a transformational scheme. And elements of this have now been picked up through the CRSTS bid that we were successful for with Government. As part of the bid, it was agreed that we would have 2 aspects to this. Well, the key aspect was the whole package that we're looking at costs about 78 to 88 million pounds. What we've actually got available through the CRSTS is 4.3 million pounds. And Government made it clear that they were keen on pushing forward with the delivery of a small package of bus priority measures in this area, which includes 1.8 kilometres of bus lanes, leading to journey time and reliability improvements, and also themes around improved cycling and walking. Now that's a key piece of work that's ongoing now, and that's what the approval is seeking for. But it's also seeking funding to fund up to outline business case for this larger, more ambitious programme across North East Calderdale that I just referenced, of 78 to 88 million pound. That is unfunded, as we say, but what we're looking for here is to get to a state of what we could possibly call pipeline readiness, so schemes that are ready to bid for in the next round. This larger scheme includes an area-wide urban traffic management control system, UTMC, local traffic neighbourhoods, 20-mile-an-hour zones, series of crossings, junction improvements and bus gates. That's now got to be worked up over the coming period with the funding that's being sought here. And what we're seeking for is £1.56 million funding to work through to this outline business case work. Obviously, the recognition that the bus priority work, the bus priority measure package, is of key importance in moving forward here.
Thank you. Are we happy to approve? Yes, great stuff. And moving on, Dave.
Moving on, this one's probably a little bit more complicated. I'll try and simplify as much as possible. So as an overview, the following three schemes or programmes have been made possible due to the devolution arrangements as a mayoral combined authority. We've worked with DFT on this one quite closely because what they want to ensure is that each programme is able to report on outcomes and outputs. And this is a shift in how it's been previously done, and it's also linked to the conditions of City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement, where government wants to be clear of what they're getting for the funding that's in there. What we want to be clear about here is that this isn't sort of an overkill of assurance, linking back to what we just talked about in the insurance framework item there before. These lists have been formed through close collaboration with the partner councils, working on the basis of a light touch appraisal approach. And what it will lead to is what we call a single strategic outline case being produced each year. And this is what we have here in these reports. But through the programme being managed in this way, we want to build up a better regional picture, which will in turn and in time help us to lobby for more from government in the future. And we can be more explicit around the added benefits of a well-maintained network for active travel, bus, public transport, health, etc. We want to be able to identify carbon savings and also move away from either issues or we call stigma labelled as around the word pothole. It's more around what we can do for the network rather than just patching and mending. That's the overview. I'll move on to the first one, which is the asset management and maintenance. And this includes off-highway walking and cycle networks. And here we're approving for delivery in hand for Q1 of next year, 23-24. And this is a prioritised list of schemes for completion that will be scheduled on a yearly basis. And these are developed, as I said, through partnership with the local authority leads, through what we have as a Highways Infrastructure Asset Management Board. And we have to recognise here that what we're dealing with is a £1.3 billion backlog in this area over time. And the good news, though, is through the City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement, we managed to get a £248 million settlement for this activity of asset management. And that's a 37% increase on previous allocations. And I think that was a hard fought battle to get that. And I think the case we made for doing that was well made as well. So all districts are getting increases from across the board. The original figure was 180 million here, and the increases are going up to 248 million, as I've said. So that's a 37% increase in what we had. There's also supplementary funding around off-highway cycling and walking of 3.44 million. What should be noted here is we are in year one at the moment. As we know, we're towards the end of year one. The decision on CRSTS wasn't made until probably nearly halfway through year one, so that gave us some issues. So we're treating year one as a transitional year. We're using historic splits in terms of how we allocate it, but DFT have come up with a new recording mechanism for network length figures, and they will form the new splits as has been agreed in the report here. And this shields authorities from having a cliff edge of step change in terms of the quantum of funding they're getting. But what should be noted is every authority is getting quite a bit more money than they previously were under this new regime. Say a little bit more about this. So what we're looking to approve here is on the asset management side, 24.8 million for quarter 3 and 4 this year, and 12.4 for quarter 1 next year. And on the cycling side, 344k for quarter 3 and 4 this year, 172,000 for quarter 1 next year. And that's the first one.
That's a huge number of projects and will make, I think, a big difference to getting around in Coltdale, and also for government to understand that local authorities have had a real challenge financially and that the state of the roads has really suffered because of that. So I think that's something to be welcome. Are we happy to approve? Thank you. And you have to go. Thank you very much for coming. Cheers. Okay, happy to... Councillor Galton.
So I'm just making sure we're covering all of those in 11C.
There is more to come.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was the most lengthy part of it, shall I say. The other two I'll just go through quickly.
One second.
Oh,
We just get approval for that, if that's okay? All happy to approve? Yes? Okay, let's move on.
My apologies. And move on to the next one, which is the CRSTS management and renewals and enhancements. Again, we're looking for approval for moving forward to delivery. And this is a total value of 25 million for the programme. We're seeking approval of 1.865 development money for quarter 3 and 4, 22-23, and 931,250,000 for quarter 1 next year. And this one's around renewing and replacing outdated infrastructure that controls traffic, such as traffic signals and technology. This will lead to improved resilience and reliability in the bus network, including issues or aspects around bus and cycle detection.
Councillor Galton.
Thanks, Mayor. So it's traffic signalling. Yes, traffic lights. Just wanted to confirm that, yeah? The only reason I ask is, obviously it's a really good thing we need to invest in, but I'm questioning the risk register which is included in the project, because I'm not sure if it's led by the West Yorkshire Combined Authority as the responsible authority for the management of traffic signalling within West Yorkshire, or whether it's individual councils who are responsible for their own infrastructure. So I'd appreciate that being clarified if you can. And I'm not sure if individual authorities are coming to you for the money for what they want to do, or whether you're encouraging them to come up with a response to what you think is a priority. Because I noted that you said you're employing light touch appraisals to the schemes within this. And the risk register in here, on this particular one, talks about the biggest risk being contractors not being available to deliver the long-term programme. But there's another risk which has been highlighted to me and my colleagues, which is a lot of the infrastructure that we have in Leeds, and I don't know about the other local authorities, so I'm hoping that can be clarified through this inquiry. A lot of our infrastructure is very old and relies on halogen lamps for the signalling. And other authorities have been through the renewal programme already, and those that haven't yet completed their renewal programme are at risk because of supply of halogen lamps. So if we take years transferring over to LEDs, then there's a problem that we might not have halogen lamps to replace those traffic signalling points which fail because the manufacturers have stopped manufacturing. And if we have it as a 5-year program and the manufacturers stop producing within 12 to 18 months, then we've got a problem, haven't we, if we haven't forecast and pre-procured. So I just wondered if that had been taken into consideration and whether you have any agency to impose any kind of timeline on it.
Thanks. We don't control the lights, so it's not our fault if you stuck at a stop sign. Dave.
I can come back on that though. The first thing to say is the Combined Authority are overseeing the programme management of this and the coordination of this. It is up to each of the authorities in terms to understand their own priorities within this. We've been working very closely with each of the authorities through the Chief Highways Officers of the authorities or equivalents, and over time they have established what their key priorities for renewal are. And you know, it's fair to say you're right. There have been discussions around people and where the maintenance regimes of the various different maintenance regimes across different authorities and where that leads to, and that's taken into account through this in terms of how or what the priorities are of each authority. There have also been discussions around replacing outdated and obsolete technology such as halogen light, the halogen light issue you talked about. It's an ongoing discussion. I think as we move beyond the year one, which we're nearly at, we'll get more into that and working out where the key priorities are. But we will be reviewing the list, working collaboratively with the district councils to understand where their priorities are and what the outcomes from those are as well.
Thank you. Good stuff. Happy to approve. Brilliant. Lots of nods. Thank you. Moving on to safer roads, something that's very important for me. Dave.
Okay, safer roads. Again, fairly briefly. It's another one that's come through the City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement Programme. The total value of the programme is about 25 million, and we're seeking release of 2.5 million development and delivery for this year and 1.25 million for the first quarter of next year. This is Safer Roads programmes includes lots of really good stuff like traffic. Oh. Okay, Safer Roads, again, fairly briefly.
I'm just wondering where the noise was coming from. I thought you had hecklers then.
You sound like myself, heckling myself.
Please carry on then.
Okay, where are they up to? So the Safer Roads programme includes aspects such as traffic calming, pedestrian and cycle facilities, speed limit in positions, parking reductions, and safety at targeted locations. And the key thing here is it is a 5-year programme contributing very strongly towards the Vision Zero programme that we have. A benefit cost ratio for this programme has been established at being somewhere over 4 to 1, so it's a very, very worthwhile thing to do in terms of the benefits that arise and accrue from it.
Thank you so much. Questions or happy to approve? Happy to approve. Brilliant. Thank you so much. I'm aware we've only 20 minutes left and we still have substantive items on the agenda. Finally, Leeds City Centre.
I'll rush on this one. This is the closest I've ever looked to approve. It's just across the road from where we are right now. It's Thirsk Row, which is part of the Leeds City Square Plus scheme. It's about converting it to a two-way operation, which you'll see at the moment is ongoing, and this is key to the bus routing in the city centre and linked to further improvements to pedestrians and cyclists in the city centre. This is actually a change request, so it's basically changing the amount of funding that's required. So it's putting £939,000 from City Region towards Sustainable Transport Settlement, towards a 1.5 million scheme. And of course, it's part of that wider programme of enhancements around the city centre that we've been seeing over the last 2 or 3 years.
Great stuff. We're nearly there with those changes in the city centre, aren't we? Happy to approve? Lovely, thank you so much. Thank you, Dave. Right, moving on to governance arrangements. Hopefully this report is self-explanatory and seeks approval for a number of governance changes. I wonder, Caroline, could you just give us a quick thumbnail and then we can move on to approvals?
Thank you, Mayor. Happy to do that. There's 4 substantive recommendations here. The first 2 relate to proposals for additional non-voting advisory representatives to be added to both the Climate, Energy and Environment Committee and the Business, Economy and Innovation Committee. In relation to the first, the climate one, the proposal has come through from the interim chair in consultation with the deputy chair and lead director for that committee in terms of the I suppose the expertise and the knowledge that the West Yorkshire Housing Partnership bring to the agenda of that committee. So that is both these positions are non-advisory. They're ex officio reps, so they're there in terms of that level of expertise. The second one is in relation to the Business Economy and Innovation Committee, and we've had a gap on that from the retirement of the previous representative of the Chamber of Commerce. So it's proposed that that gap is filled, but following consultation, the proposal is that that's done on a rota between the wider business representative groups to bring that expertise back into the committee. So Mayor, they're the first two related recommendations. The third recommendation is entirely separate, and it relates to the ongoing implementation of the Combined Authority's new operating model at officer level, and it is seeking approval for the appointment of the Interim Director, Transport Policy and Development in accordance with that recommendation as a consequence of the interim arrangements we've got whilst the substantive recruitment is undertaken for those director posts. And then finally, unrelated again, we're proposing a use of the Chief Exec's delegation in very specific circumstances. We heard one of the earlier items that the Place Committee met but were in quorate and so indicated their support for a recommendation but weren't able to take it. So what we're proposing here, if members are happy to agree it, is that in circumstances such as those, that the Chief Executive could use his delegated authority to take the decision. I think what we're very aware of is in terms of the timing and frequency of meetings coming up. In this case, there was a combined authority meeting that could take those decisions in place. What we wouldn't want to see is, in terms of urgent capital approvals, for example, that they were delayed because of an absence of meetings over the summer period. So they are the recommendations. Very happy to take any questions on those. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. And just to say, it's really helpful if we can move at speed depending on people's availability, and to have that opportunity to move things along, I think will be very valuable, changing governance. And yes, Mark.
Thank you, Mayor, and kind of fully support the recommendations, and it works really well with the co-opted member on the LEP board as well. Just a point of detail, in 2.6 it suggests that the business rep group member is appointed to the Climate, Energy and Committee. Can we just note that it's actually the Business Committee, which is correct in the recommendations?
Forensic. Thank you so much, Mark. You keep us all on our toes. Important and detailed. Really great. Thank you. Are we all happy to approve those recommendations? Terrific. Okie doke, then let's move on to item 13, which is the CoStar Innovation Hub. Remember my comments from earlier that the appendices are exempt, and if you wish to discuss those, we will have to then go into a private meeting. This report outlines a really fantastic opportunity to bid with partners for up to £51 million worth of UK research and innovation funding to build a national innovation hub for the creative sector located at Langthwaite Enterprise Zone, South Kirby. The appendices to this item are exempt, and as I mentioned, we'll have to go private if you wish to discuss. Before seeking members' views, could I invite Phil Wycherley to outline the proposed bid? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll give a really high-level overview, and we can go in more detail if we need to discuss the exempt items. The reason why the majority, some of the exempt items are for commercial reasons, some of them because we're part of a competitive bid as well. So we've been approached for this opportunity, and the government are running a competition for a £51 million worth of investment for a UK RI to create a national innovation centre in what's known as the Convergent Screen Technologies and Performance in Real-Time Industry. So what does that mean? What does that mean for us? This is the kind of clever technologies used for things like video games, music production, film production, TV production. We were approached by the University of York, so there's good partnership across kind of our wider region for this, who are one of the leading academic departments in the country in this field. To be a partner with them on this bid, and there are a range of other partners who are in the kind of exempt annex as well. And the reason why they want to partner with us is because there is an ideal site, and a number of national and regional stakeholders have identified the ideal site in our Langthwaite Enterprise Zone, which is co-located next to a leading business in this sector in Production Park. And Production Park, for those of you who don't know it, are a business that provide the sets and design the sets for a range of global music performances. So artists kind of for all the way from kind of Beyonce go there to kind of practice and perform at that facility. So it's a kind of a regional gem we don't talk about as often as we probably should, but it'll be co-located with that facility, and also is on an enterprise zone, which is one of our enterprise zones that we need to develop. And if we are successful in getting this facility through the national investment, it will clearly make the enterprise zone a very attractive site for other creative businesses in this sector. Just on the bid itself, just in terms of the regional part, in terms of the wider partnership and support for this, we have been approached. So Mark Roberts, our LEP chair, has had a letter from the LEP chair of North Yorkshire and East Riding LEP, because that LEP have encouraged us to bid for this, recognising that partnership and the site. We've also recognised that this is going to be complementary to our wider creative industries in the region, our wider universities and academic institutions in the region, and having that asset is complementary. It's not competing with that, and we're working to ensure that's the case, and that's critical, I think, for us as a region. In terms of the bid itself, what we're asking for, and the deadline is 3 o'clock this afternoon for the bid to be submitted, is approval to enter this expression of interest phase with University of York and the range of partners. We're also asking for because we have to start working at pace because of the deadlines around the bid, for the release of some initial resourcing, 250,000 initial resourcing, to help us do the work we need to do to begin to make the Langthwaite site ready, and potentially funding that through the residual growing places funding. The other thing we're asking the combined authority to do is to approve 2 documents that are in the appendices for this report. One of them is a memorandum of understanding with the other partners, and that memorandum of understanding is clear about our role as part of that partnership, but also critically that all partners can withdraw at any time if it is deemed, and we'll be bringing this further to this committee for decisions on this, because the other part of the recommendation is a letter of support, which includes what we might provide subject to assurance in terms of support to unlock this site. I'll leave it there, Chair.
Thank you so much. We know, don't we, that VP, virtual production, is one of the biggest growth areas in film and TV. And to be a centre of excellence for the UK in this field, given all of our ambitions regionally, I think it just feels like a very exciting opportunity. And thank you to the team for working at such speed to draw partners together. I think it's going to be great, and hopefully our bid will be successful. And in the same way, when we bid for Eurovision, it is just a bid, but hopefully this time we won't be beaten by Liverpool. Boo! Do you want to come in, Jen?
Thank you, Mayor. Just on behalf of my next door neighbours in Wakefield, Production Park, significant source of employment and training in the area as well, and I know that it will be very welcome, the extra investment in there, and really starting to see the benefits of our economic strategy in supporting culture in good quality jobs coming to the area.
Thank you. Point really well made. Thank you. We're all happy to approve. Great stuff. We need more projects like this, don't we? We want to be the centre of excellence in many things. Okie dokie, thank you very much. So if you need to leave now to write the email to get it away. Thanks ever so much, everyone. And just to say, the next meeting is the 16th of March, 2023. And thank you again for your attendance and your interest and your great questions. Thanks so much, and see you in March.